QR codes, and this is CNN Tonight. And, well, people who have nothing to hide don't destroy evidence that must be archived under the law. Says who? Donald Trump.
People who have nothing to hide don't smash phones with hammers, don't bleach their emails or destroy evidence to keep it from being publicly archived as required under federal law.
Remember all those cries of crooked Hillary or lock her up and throw away the key? Well, you remember.
Crooked Hillary. Hillary was a criminal. She deleted her emails. People go to jail for that. Her emails, which put America's entire national security at risk. So crooked Hillary, crooked and you should lock her up, I'll tell you.
Doesn't age well, does it? You know, his relentless attacks actually work, though, right? That infamous private server controversy may very well have cost Hillary Clinton the presidency. Now, look, in no way would I ever endeavor to excuse any mishandling of government information, particularly if it's classified materials, and especially if you're Secretary of State. But let's talk about what actually happened in reaction to those allegations. The FBI did open a criminal investigation, and the Justice Department closed it without bringing any charges against Clinton or anyone else within the scope of that investigation. There were no findings of any intentional violation of law in that case. And let's not forget, there were hearings launched by House Republicans in Congress over those emails. So if consistency is what you should go for, and having sort of the knowledge of what happens in one instance must happen in another, you would expect those same Republicans who led the charge for investigations then to be vocal now. But they seem to be awfully quiet now about all we're learning about Trump's handling of government information. Maybe amnesia selectively? How quickly some people forget, or maybe want the electorate to forget. Will there now be lock him up chance? Well, of course they wouldn't be warranted. We don't actually know if Trump broke any laws or violated the Presidential Records Act by taking more than a dozen boxes of federal documents with him when he left office. Some of which, by the way, could contain top secret classified material, according to a new report from the Washington Post tonight. Now, obviously, the president is able to declassify things, but at Mar-a-Lago, he was now the former president, and top secret. Well, the Post cites sources saying some of those boxes actually contain material clearly marked as classified. And we do know the National Archives has asked the Justice Department to investigate just how those documents and boxes made their way to Mar-a-Lago. And something tells me they're not asking whether it was the Postal Service or FedEx, but why they're actually there instead of where they're supposed to be. And we also know that Trump had a bad habit of ripping up documents while he was in the White House. Archive staff actually had to tape some documents back together that were then handed over to the January 6th committee. And by the way, Republicans have been, well, they've been noticeably quiet about that. But you know who hasn't been quiet about that? Hillary Clinton. She's trolling Trump now about it on Twitter, posting a resounding, And now there is this new reporting that Trump also had a habit of apparently flushing papers down the toilet at the White House. This according to CNN analyst and New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman, who has an upcoming book on Trump called Confidence Man. According to her, staff in the White House residence would frequently find, I can't even dare to say this, but they would find the toilet clogged in Donald Trump's bathroom with wads of clumped up paper that wasn't toilet paper, by the way. I mean, so much clogging in the pipes, apparently, that an engineer would have to come and fix it. I wonder if that partially explains his odd obsession with toilets. I remember all those rants about not having enough water pressure to flush everything down. Do you?
We're looking very strongly at sinks and showers and other elements of bathrooms. People are flushing toilets 10 times, 15 times, as opposed to once. I won't talk about the fact that people have to flush their toilet 15 times.
I have to tell you, that kind of makes you listen to that in a whole new light, doesn't it? I mean, even it was odd then 15 times and not wanting to talk about it. But I want you to know he calls this another fake story. He calls it, quote, categorically untrue. Says it's, quote, made up for publicity for a, quote, mostly fictitious book. Now that, what he calls a mostly fictitious book, that's one that he agreed to be interviewed for. And in a new statement, he also claims that, look, he had no legal obligation to return any records to the National Archives, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But he also says that he worked collaboratively to do so nonetheless. And meanwhile, there's also the mystery of the gaps in White House phone logs on January 6th. Gaps as to what transpired that day. Records the House Select Committee has obtained apparently don't contain entries of phone calls between the former president and lawmakers, the same calls that have already been widely reported in the press. Now, look, perhaps that's for a benign reason. It could be because Trump sometimes used his aides' phones, or maybe his own personal phones. We actually don't know yet, but it is something that this January 6th committee is trying to get to the bottom of, and with good reason. So the question is, did Trump violate the Presidential Records Act with all of those boxes that found their way to Mar-a-Lago? I mean, especially if there were top secret documents in there, according to the Washington Post. And if so, could there actually be criminal consequences to this? Let's turn now to two experts on this, CNN legal